This is the new Flysky ProArt PA01, and genuinely, from what I've seen, this is one of the most interesting radios released this year. Now, Flysky isn't a brand I would be instantly attracted to buy a radio from. However, don't be fooled here. Not only is this one of the nicest radios that I have seen, it has an incredible amount of functions and support, including official support with Edge TX and Express ELRS, but there's more to the story because it also has its own RC control system as well. And in this video, I'm going to give you a complete overview of this radio, walk you through its features, the operating system, the RF system, and then at the end, we're going to tear it down and share with you my thoughts. Just to be clear though, before we get into it, Flysky did send me this radio over to take a look at for free. However, they have not paid me to make this video. They've not seen this video before it's been published. And as always, my thoughts are entirely my own. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is a quick unboxing, but I am just going to put a warning up. I don't know if this is the standard retail packaging. There is a slight customization on this radio that I have that you won't, and that is that Flysky have engraved my name on it down there. I'm not entirely sure if what I've got in here is exactly what you would get when you buy it, so just please be aware of that. Now, in the box with my radio, I have a very, very nice lanyard, which is under the handset there with RGB colours. And it is a really nice lanyard as well. And I like that with a nice buckle. We have the PA01 handset, which we will take a nice closer look at in a minute. Gamepad style controller. Really nice actually in the hand already. And then we have some additional accessories in the kit, which includes a USB-A to C cable. And I also have a batch of stickers, a cable, as well as a receiver in the kit as well. Walking you around the handset first of all. Now, as you can see, it is a gamepad style controller. It is wider than the likes of the Radiomaster Pocket, but it certainly isn't as big as the likes of the Zorro. As you can see, externally it is made of plastic. It has this nice smoked shell. You can see the PCB through, and there are also RGB LEDs inside as well that we will take a look at later on. In the middle, you can see there's a big display. It is a 2.4-inch color IPS display, although it is non-touch. It has some multi-function buttons down below this, 4 trim switches, as well as our main controls for our operating system, which are plastic, but there is a nice metal roller wheel here, a vertical roller for scrolling through the menu. The gimbals on this are mini gimbals, but they are Hall effect sensors. Included with the radio in the grips at the back are 2 metal stick ends. You can see they have machined flat spots around the side, as well as a machined crown. And then you simply have a thread with a nut that screws into the gimbal. This nut gives you a little bit of height adjustment, allowing you to set it to your own personal preference. And then moving up to the top, you can see our main control functions, which consist of a latching SA button, which is going to be your typical arm. We've got SB and SC, which are 3-position switches. An SD, which is a momentary button. And then we've got 2 potentiometers on the back, S1 and 2, which have metal wheels on them as well. Flicking around to the rear of the radio, you will see that there are some nice rubber grips which have slots in for our stick ends. There are also 2 additional buttons on the back of the radio. You can see 1 momentary there and 1 momentary there. They're located right in the grips for your fingers, just like that. And then in the middle, we have our module bay, which is a nano module bay, and there's also an output down the bottom. With regards to I/O, on the top we have a headphones port, USB, as well as a DSC port, and on the bottom there are also these 3 little pads. These are for a dock Flysky make to allow you to charge the radio. With regards to the built-in RF system on this radio, as I've said, it does use their own one, but it does support Express ELRS as well. And it has this nice articulating antenna. You can actually withdraw this up and then rotate this vertically if you want. And it is also tilting as well. And then to pack away, to stop it getting damaged in transport, you simply turn it back and it slots away like that. When it comes to powering this radio, it supports two 18650s. These are located under the rubber grips at the back in the shell. You can see that there is a battery bay that side, and then if I just pop that side off, there is a battery bay there too. Also, when it comes to the gimbals, mine came pre-self-centered. However, I have now adjusted my throttle. You can do this without tearing the radio apart. The access to the screws is available from within the battery bay. When it comes to the software on this radio, it comes shipped with Edge TX. To power the radio on, we simply press once and then press and hold our power button. It'll then boot up into Edge TX. One of the nice features on this radio is the fact that it is running Edge TX and it is actually using a H7 CPU. Instead of one of the earlier F series, it is running the latest H7 series, which is going to mean not only does this radio run really nice and fast, it's also going to fully support that color display as well. When it comes to the other main specification, as I've said, this radio works on either Express ELRS or their internal AFHDS3 system running on 2.4 GHz. That is based on the traditional SX series of chipsets, which means it isn't based on the LR series, which means it's single band, but it does support up to 500 milliwatts of RF power. That screen, as I've said, is a colour touchscreen with a resolution of 240 by 320 and it is an IPS display as well, although as I've said it isn't touch, so there's no controls there. And then you've got your normal menu buttons down here. So for instance, we've got our model button which takes us through our different model screens, return, our page, or I can press the button and go into the settings. Brightness wise, this screen to me in the workshop here looks pretty good. Here I've got it on maximum brightness, and whilst I can't give you any nits number, I can give you a comparison compared to the likes of the TX15. It is my opinion that the TX15 is a little bit brighter. I just pop the TX15 there and just make sure it doesn't go into standby. That is also on maximum brightness, and then the PA01 there. It isn't quite as bright as the TX15, but it doesn't really look dimmer to me. It looks it on camera more than visually in person. I certainly don't think it's going to be too much of a problem whilst out and about. There are some people who are always going to complain about the brightness of touchscreens. It just doesn't seem to quite have what we have on the TX15, but it isn't terrible. It certainly isn't dramatically different to my own eyes looking at it here in the studio. Because this radio is running Edge TX, that means you have all of the usual functionality for your main switches and buttons. And these 4 buttons down the bottom here are also fully customizable as well. They are wired straight to the microcontroller, which means you can fully configure them within the Edge TX system, including changing the colors of the LEDs. We can go down into the modes, go down into our customizable switches, and we can not only configure the switch type, so we can set them to 2 position, toggle or none, but we can also control their grouping, set them as 1 button for 1 channel or 4 buttons for different positions on the same channel. And then you can even customize the LED, including full color customization as well. So for instance there, you can see I can move through all of the different color options on the button too. Alongside the controls for the buttons, you also have some scripting available for these LEDs down the side. If we go into the main menu and into our radio settings, under our scripting, we also have settings for the RGB LEDs. And whilst I haven't been able to get all of these to work, I have been able to set, say, blue, execute, and then force the LEDs into blue, which means you have the option of setting these to either a function on your radio, a switch on your radio, allowing them to even be a notification. Now, alongside all of that main functionality, like the H7 CPU, the color display, programmable buttons, RGB, this radio also has a gyro sensor built in, and with the latest versions of Edge TX, you can use that to do some cool stuff, like read out telemetry values when you tilt your radio. I talked about this in my TX15 review. I'm not going to go over it again in this one. It's an Edge TX function, but again, it's built into this radio and it's there for you to be able to use. As I showed at the start of the video, included with the kit is also a receiver. Now in the pack for this, they include a couple of spare antennas. There's 4 spare antennas. Wow, that's quite generous. We've got our wiring, which is 3 wires. Interesting, no 4th. And then you've got little instructions. Now, it is obviously a diversity receiver. It is dual antenna. There is our pads along the bottom there. We can see we've got signal, and then we've got our other 2. It's hard to see at this point what the receiver is based on. It is already covered in some heat shrink tubing. I might pull that off in a minute and have a closer look. But what they're basically saying is you can bind it to the radio following the instructions. This is obviously based on their own internal system, which is AFHDS3. This isn't Express ELRS. However, as I've said, we can flash the radio with Express ELRS, which we will look at later on. When it comes to using a radio, it isn't just about the operating system, the switches and the features. It's also about the ergonomics, the build quality and how the radio feels in the hand. Plastics are solid, right up there with the best of them. Nice weight to the handset as well. 18650s help with that, but the weight of the radio is substantial. I don't think it's going to be too heavy, but it's nice to have a bit of weight in the hand. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall away. The rubber grips are nice enough. They're not super sticky, but they're not super slippy either. They offer a nice amount of grip in the hands. Overall, the reach of the radio is good as well, so on the sticks, it's fine. Button access is nice and easy. Arm in, I can reach around to the switches. You've got your wheels, as I've said earlier. They do have indents on them as they move, so you can sort of rotate it. It stops, then you can rotate it. Doesn't have a huge throw, so just to show you what the throw is. So if I just find the center, there we go. So just to show you, that's the throw that way, back to center. That's the throw that way. Does have lots of little notches on it. If I just put it up to the audio, you can hear it there. So you've got like an individual step, but it's very hard to do the steps one at a time. But it does have a sort of stop position in the middle, and then you can push it past, and they're both the same on either side. With regards to the gimbals, I am really impressed with how these feel. Solid. And genuinely, I think this is the most solid small gimbal I have felt on any radio. There is no movement at all without real force. I'm having to really put force on that to do that. They feel really good. Plenty of throw. About the only complaint I'd have on the sticks, I like the stick ends, but I don't like the little nut to sort of lock them in position if you want them longer. What I have found on the bench is you can sort of wind it up and wind the nut down, but it just keeps coming loose. I'd like something a bit more substantial to lock it in than that. But overall, really like that. I'm more than happy with how that feels. Then you've obviously got your buttons on the front. Closing my eyes, yeah, I can find them no problem at all. So if I'm on the sticks and I want to reach down, I can feel the trims. The trims are very distinctive because of the type of button. I can find that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. So I can go 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I can do that without too much thought. And then obviously on the back, you've got your momentaries as well. They are really nicely positioned for your fingers there. Genuinely, I think they've got the ergonomics on this radio absolutely bang on. Comparing it to some other radios, here we've got it up next to the Radio Master Pocket. This is probably the closest radio equivalent to this, although functionality-wise, they are very, very different. You can see, obviously, a much bigger display, wider radio, more buttons as well. And I have to say, from a gimbal perspective, they do feel better on the PA01 as well. There's a little bit of flex on the Radio Master gimbal, whereas this one is pretty solid. It's also not as deep as the Pocket either. It's definitely a slightly narrower radio as well. Moving down to the GX12, because again, this is probably not a similar class, but there isn't a dramatic amount between them when it comes to actual sheer desk space. You know, if I overlay one on top of the other, you gain back this area here in the middle, but overall it's actually a very similar footprint. But again, we have a radio that has a color screen versus monochrome. Other than that though, similar functionality, although this is using the new LR1121 chipset, so this is dual band, whereas this radio is single band Express LRS. And finally, putting it up against the TX15, this is a different class radio, same size as the Boxer. In many ways, there is overlap between these radios, H7 CPU, color display, but that's really where the similarity ends. But I did just want to lay them up side by side so you could see them. As I mentioned several times, this radio has a number of options with regards to its radio system. Now, as I mentioned already, my radio came pre-flashed with the AF-HDS3 system installed. This doesn't use an app like Express LRS does. When it comes to controlling that RF system, it is all done via the model screen. You would simply go down to internal RF. You've got your mode at the top, which you can see is there, and then we've got our channel settings, our fail-safe settings, all located under here. However, this radio's internal module can actually be flashed and use Express LRS. It supports up to 500 milliwatts of RF power, and it uses the traditional Express LRS SX series of chipset based on 2.4 gigahertz. As a result of that, it will be compatible with all of the normal Express LRS receivers on the 2.4 gigahertz band, but because it is SX based, it means it doesn't support features like Gemini or Gemini X like you may see on some of the LR1121 based chipsets. Flysky have their own web-based configurator for their radios that allows you to not only flash the radio firmware, but also the RF firmware as well. Some of Flysky's radios support either EdgeTX or their own in-house Flysky OS, and you also then have the option to select the RF system. Now, the PA01 only supports EdgeTX. However, from an RF firmware perspective, you can choose between their internal system, which is AF-HDS3 or Express LRS, and I'm going to show you how to flash Express LRS next. I'm going to take our USB-C cable, plug it into the radio, and we're going to select USB serial VCP. Then on the web-based configurator, we're going to go to RF firmware and choose Express LRS. It's going to give us a warning about installing the firmware. I'm going to click the disclaimer, click agree and proceed. And from here, we can then select our transmitter. We're going to select our model. We're going to select the firmware version, which is 3.6.0. And then we're going to select the flashing method, which for this is EdgeTX pass-through. Click next. And once the firmware has loaded, we're going to click connect to our device, select it from our serial port, and then allow the flash to proceed. Once the flash is complete, your radio should be ready to use Express LRS. Once the radio is flashed, you then simply need to change the internal protocol. To do this, you're going to need to go into the radio settings, go across to hardware, scroll down to internal RF and change the type from AF-HDS3 to CRSF. And then from within your model, we're going to go back into internal RF and then turn that on. And now we are in Express LRS. If we now go back into our settings and then go to our Lua script for Express LRS, you can see that it has now connected, and we can then have all of our usual Express LRS options, and we have the ability to set the RF power up to a maximum of 500 milliwatts. Now, this wouldn't be my channel if we didn't tear it down and have a look what's going on inside, so that's what we're going to do next. So the first thing we're going to do is take off our sticks and then remove our batteries. I don't know what the process is going to be for taking this radio apart. I've never done a Flysky radio before, so we are all doing this as a journey together. Just trying to get the rubber covers off. You actually peel them from there, and then it unclips. There we go. Popping the batteries out. We're going to pop off that back cover as well. So looking around, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there seems to be a few others down here. One there, and one there as well. So there are a few screws on this one. Okay, so I've removed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's the edge screws. There are more you can see, but they look like they're for the gimbal adjustment, not actually holding the radio together. Now, I don't know if there are also clips on this that hold it together too. I can definitely start to feel that separate a little bit. Oh, that is definitely how it comes apart. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to very gently flip that up. Oh, wow. Okay. So the back cover comes off completely with no wires crossing between it. Wow. Okay. I really like that design as well. We've got these pins that go along and then they go in to the radio there and there. We'll look at that a bit more in a minute. But as a result of that, there's no need to worry about any wires or anything like that between the front and the back of the handset. There's then a PCB board here that clearly has power regulation on board. You see there's a coil there, not quite straight on the pad, but other than that, it looks okay. We've also got everything labeled too. Look at that. All of the test pads are labeled as well. S port, CRFS. That's really, really nice to see. Okay, now looking at the front of the radio, that's the ports I was talking about there for the power. This is very interesting. Okay, we've got our gimbals on either side and there are boards on each one. There's actually a microcontroller. We've got our LED tubes here and here. That one's not in the hole. I don't know, that might have come out when I took the radio apart. So, okay, we need to get that back in. We've then got like a big ribbon cable that goes from one gimbal to another. So this gimbal looks like it connects to this one and then this one connects to the radio. You've then also got a thin ribbon cable across the top, the kind of ones you sort of see in smartphones and stuff, going over the top there. So that's going from that pot. You can see the potentiometers up there. And then we've got a fan for our built-in radio system. And then you can see the antenna port there. It does actually look like it's a separate PCB, but it is soldered to the main PCB. So there is a step on it. So it's obviously swappable, but it is a different PCB as well. And then we've got our switches and everything on that top board there. And then there's this really large like plastic cover for the antenna. So if I just pull the antenna up, you can see when you pull the antenna up, where the coax moves. That's not glued on. I would have liked to have seen that glued just because there is a bit of movement on that when you rotate it and pull it up and down. I'm not saying it would pull off, but as you can see, there is a tiny bit of movement there on that connector when you are doing it. So I would call that a risk point. That's about the only thing I think to change. And then we've got a fan coming through to there. Looking at this top section, this looks like it will come off. There are a couple of Phillips screws down there from the look of it. Now if I just try and get my driver down, you can see them there. There's one there. Let's undo that one. And then I'm guessing we can take all of this out in one hit. If we undo the ribbon cable. So that's the two screws undone. I'm going to gently undo the UFL for the antenna. And then this ribbon cable from here. Here we go. And I'm hoping Ta-ta! You can then see all of that comes off as one module, and you can now see the switches in there. So the switch, the momentary buttons and latches and buttons are on one PCB, and then your potentiometers are on another half moon shaped metal pots. Really nicely well designed. And then that now frees up the top end of the radio, and I can actually see now, oh, that was the screw for that. We can see now that there's actually another board stacked below it as well. So you've got your main PCB, your RF, which is on top, and then another PCB behind it. And now I've removed that. You can see that microcontroller up there in a bit more detail. I think we're going to need to get that under the microscope to have an understanding of what that is. Okay, so that's an F32 F03. So I'm guessing this is a microcontroller for the hall sensors, and then that is communicating via this wiring harness down to the main PCB. But this must be handling the whole gimbal input for the radio. Now, I don't know how far I'm going to go with the teardown on this because it is quite compact in here. I've been having a look around. We're going to get off one of the Hall sensor boards so we can have a look at it. I've been trying to find the microcontroller, and I think it's actually located here. You can see that there's pins down the side. Now, this heatsink is all attached and it goes up to here. If I just remove this fan, what it looks like is they have a combined heatsink for the RF system, but also the main microcontroller as well. As I've said, this uses a H-series MCU, apparently. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't look like I can get the heatsink off from this side of the board, but you can see if I flip it up, there's definitely a large IC there. So my prediction is that is the main microcontroller. The RF board is here, but it does appear to be screwed in from the other side. I would also like to have a look at the Hall sensor. I suspect the reason why we have a microcontroller is that it'll be using the single Hall sensor rather than a specific Hall sensor on each axis. I'm going to need to change my screwdriver to do this. Let me just grab the right size, or at least something close to the right size, and then we will pop off this one over here. And I am suspecting we will find a dual axis Hall sensor, a single Hall sensor like you see on the likes of the TBS Mambo. Usually what you find is if there's dual Hall sensors, they can connect straight to the main microcontroller. But when you have a dual axis one, a single chip, it usually needs its own microcontroller for configuration and calibration to ensure that it remains stable across the temperature ranges. Just going to pop that up. Ah, yeah, exactly what I thought. So what you've got is a single Hall effect sensor in the center. You've then got a single magnet in the middle of the gimbal. And then that is what is being detected by the Hall sensor, and that is why you then have the microcontroller, because that microcontroller will handle the calibration data for those sensors. So that is as far as I am going to go. I'm not going to go any deeper. I have to say, I really like the design of the radio. About the only complaint I'd make is I would like to have seen that UFL glued. Overall quality of the PCB looks really good. Some components not quite straight. A couple of coils specifically, a little bit to the side here and there. That happens. It's not really a problem. It's something you just notice. It'll happen in normal reflowing. But overall, the build quality of the radio looks very, very nice. Now, just before I reassemble this, I just thought I'd show you I've put a little hot glue on that UFL there. If you buy this radio, you probably don't need to do this, but I did just want to demonstrate what I have done. If you ever have this radio and you find that over time the signal just stops working, it is possible that that has popped off. I wouldn't call it a design fault or anything like that. I just like to see a little bit of glue on the connectors just to make sure things don't pop off. Now, before I share with you my thoughts, we just need to talk about price. Having looked around, this radio isn't as widely available as some of the others on the market, but you are starting to see it pop up on places like AliExpress and Banggood. Today on Banggood, it's available for $162.83, and on AliExpress, pricing seems to vary anywhere from $169 all the way up to just over $300. In the UK, we've seen it for $135.92 on Banggood, and again, price ranges from $161 all the way up to £260. Whilst this radio isn't as cheap as some of the others available on the market, it is worth taking into account that you are getting a lot more here for the money. Not only that H7 CPU, but also all of that additional functionality. Okay, so to share with you my thoughts on the PA01 from Flysky, and genuinely, I think this is the best radio you can buy in this size class. What Flysky have done here has blown me away. They have delivered so much in this form factor of a radio, and there is nothing in this size class that comes close today. It isn't the same type of radio as a TX16, TX15 Boxer. They're much bigger radios. This is in the Zorro category, the Pocket category, light radios, all of those other smaller radios, and none of them come close to this, not only for functionality, but just how well this radio has been thought out and put together. I love the fact that we have a radio in this size and this form factor that has that H7 CPU, color touchscreen. The gimbals are incredibly good on this radio. The ergonomics are very nicely laid out. I can get to everything, and it has tons of buttons, fully programmable, which means you have a huge amount of options here. Add on top of that, it supports 500 milliwatts of express ELRS, and it has the latest version of Edge TX, and it takes full-size 18650s. You also have a nano module bay on the back, so if you do want to put another radio system on, you can. You have a fully articulating antenna. What is not to like about what they've done here? But it's not just about the features, it's about how well it's been put together. It isn't perfect though. There are a few minor gripes that I have. Number one is the stick ends. I don't like this nut that they've got on there for adjusting the height. I'd like to see Flysky maybe machine something better on the stick end. The stick end itself is fine, but for the height adjustment, that locks a lot easier whilst out in the field. Would have preferred 1 watt of RF power, but that's fairly minor. And if you're going to give me a colour screen, I would have liked for it to have been touchscreen, but it really isn't end of the world. About the only other thing I will mention is the potentiometers on the back. I like smooth pots with a centre detent rather than this sort of notched pot that we've got on here. It's a fairly minor gripe as someone who's mostly flying quads and doesn't really need them anyway, but it is just something I wanted to mention. However, there is so much good about this radio compared to what I've said, and honestly, there is nothing else in this size class that comes close, and this, for me, in many ways, is what the likes of the Zorro and the other radios could have been. Now, obviously, if you're interested in getting one, there will be a link to it in the description. I want to say a massive thank you to Flysky for sending it over. I could use this radio as my daily driver, and that may even end up happening yet. It is that good. And if you're interested in getting one for yourself, the link will be down below in the description. Now, if you'd like to support the channel to allow us to keep making content like this in the future, please also consider checking out the links to my Patreon as well as buy me a coffee. It is only through the support of my Patreons are we able to keep making content on this channel. And if you'd like to support us to allow us to make videos like this, please check it out. I want to say a huge thank you to every single person who has donated. We genuinely would not be able to do this without your support. Anyway, That's it from me on this one. Let me know what you think down below in the comment section. If you have any questions, pop it down there as well, and I will try and answer it. Look after yourself, stay safe, and I will speak to you soon.